I am the last keeper of the Archive of Vithal. That is not a title of honor at this point. It is a headcount. There were 11 of us when the war began in earnest. 7 when the Confederation pushed through the Verath corridor. 3 when the second siege ring closed around this station. 1 now, which is me, sitting in a vault with cracked viewport glass and a record console that still, improbably, functions. I have kept records my entire professional life. I am keeping one now because I do not know what else to do with the hours I have left. And because what happened outside that viewport deserves to exist somewhere in writing, even if only one person ever reads it. The war had been going for 11 years. I will not rehearse the politics. What matters for this account is the ending, and the ending came quickly once it started. Our side fired its final distress burst on the 4th day of the last siege. I know this because I logged it. Subcommander Vethon gave the order from the bridge, and I recorded the timestamp, the target frequency, and the intended recipient, the Eastern Arm Coalition fleet 6 sectors away, which had been promising reinforcements for 19 months. First was a standard emergency band transmission, full military encoding, aimed at a coalition comm-relay in grid sector 44 Nareth. It was a good transmission. It went exactly where it was aimed. What we did not know was that the Confederation had fired their own final distress 7 minutes earlier. I only learned this afterward from the Earth officers who came to the vault to check on me. At the time, I knew nothing of it. What I knew was that our burst left on schedule and that nothing answered. I waited at the console for 4 hours. The siege continued. I logged what I could see through the cracked viewport. Assault formations, debris spreading from the outer ring, the slow collapse of the station's secondary power grid. I am a trained archivist. I was trained to record without editorializing. I recorded. At the 4-hour mark, the signal came in. It was not from the coalition. It was on a frequency I did not recognize, a tight-band carrier wave. Military-grade compression. Encoding schema that matched nothing in our active cipher library. I ran it through the archive's historical index as a reflex. The way you check a shelf you've already checked because you have nothing else to do. The index flagged it as an Earth encoding standard. Specifically, Earth Battlefleet Emergency Response Encoding, Revision 7, last updated. The timestamp on the index entry was older than this station. I read that entry 3 times. Then I looked out the viewport. They were already there. The lead ship was unlike anything in the archive's visual registry, and I want to be precise about that because the archive is extensive. We have hull profiles for 612 distinct warship classes across 42 spacefaring civilizations. The ship outside my viewport matched none of them. It was large, larger than our heaviest cruiser class. The hull plating carried the kind of surface wear that accumulates not over a deployment cycle, but over a generation of deployments. Patched sections, mismatched alloy tones, score marks from re-entries and debris fields and things I could not identify. It moved with a deliberateness I can only describe as professional. Not aggressive, not hesitant. It moved the way a surgeon moves when they already know what they are going to do. Behind it came more. Counted 11 ships before I stopped counting and simply stared. There was a warship class I had no registry entry for. 3 of them, in close formation. There was a carrier configuration, wide, low, the silhouette of something designed to hold many smaller craft. There was a vessel I eventually identified, from hull markings visible through the viewport scope, as a hospital ship. There were supply tenders, and what appeared to be a rapid deployment engineering platform. There was one ship at the rear of the formation that I could not classify at all. I still cannot. They broke formation at the outer ring. I watched 3 of the warships move directly into the siege formation that had been pressing us for 4 days. They did not fire immediately. They broadcast on the Imperial Military Channel, a channel I could hear, and the broadcast said, in our own language, that the siege was to be suspended, that they were responding to a distress signal, and that any vessel that continued offensive action would be treated as an obstacle to emergency response. The siege formation paused. I have thought about that pause many times since. The Confederation commanders had spent 4 days pushing through our defenses at significant cost. They were hours from a conclusion, and they paused. I think they paused for the same reason I had gone quiet at the console, Nothing in their records said this was possible. And when something impossible is happening in close proximity, the first instinct, even for soldiers, is to stop and determine what it is before moving. The pause lasted 9 minutes. Then, one of the Confederation commanders transmitted a response on the same channel. "I have the recording," he said, in a tone I can only describe as carefully controlled, that they had not called for Earth's intervention, that this was not Earth's conflict, and that Earth's fleet was advised to withdraw. The Earth officer on the lead ship replied. The reply was brief. She said that she understood, and that, as soon as the injured on South sides had been stabilized and evacuated, Earth's fleet would be happy to discuss the terms of their withdrawal. She said it the way you might say something to a person who has made a reasonable point that you have nonetheless decided not to act on. The Confederation commander did not respond for 40 seconds. I counted. Then he ordered his assault formations to hold position. What followed was not a battle. I want to be clear about that. It was. I struggled to find the word in our own language, and I am not certain we have it. The humans moved through the debris field and the outer station structure with the same unhurried purposefulness they had shown from the moment they arrived. Their hospital ship moved to the location of the heaviest casualties first, and the heaviest casualties were on a Confederation troop carrier that had taken catastrophic damage in the overnight exchange. The humans went there first. Before they came to us, I recorded my own reaction to that in the log and then deleted the entry because it was not the kind of observation an archivist is supposed to make. They came to the vault 4 hours into the operation. There were 2 of them. One was a medical officer. She checked my condition with a handheld device and asked whether I was injured. The other introduced himself as a records liaison. I did not know Earth had records liaisons attached to battle fleet units, and I told him so, and he said they found it useful. He had a calm face. He asked whether the archive console was functional and whether I had been maintaining continuous records of the engagement. I said I had. He said quietly that Earth would appreciate a copy if I was willing to provide one and that no pressure was intended. I provided one. What else would I do? I asked him, while the transfer ran, how they had found us. I already suspected the answer, but I wanted it on record. He said their deep grid monitoring array had been tracking elevated distress traffic in this sector for several weeks and had flagged this grid zone as elevated risk. When 2 full-power emergency bursts hit the same comm-relay in grid sector 44 Narath within 7 minutes of each other and overlapped into what their system read as a compound SOS, the array logged it as a mass-casualty event and automatically dispatched a response fleet. I asked which signal they had responded to, ours or the Confederation's. He thought about it for a moment. Then he said, both. The array had read both transmissions simultaneously. The fleet's orders specified both source coordinates as incident sites requiring response. Neither of us had sent the call to Earth. Neither of us had known Earth was monitoring that relay corridor. The signals had collided in transit, and the collision had looked, to Earth's monitoring systems, like a single large emergency, because from one perspective it was. I have thought about this many times since. The archive of Vethal has records going back 4,000 years. We have entries on every spacefaring civilization in this region, every treaty, every war, every first contact. We have detailed entries on Earth, several of them. I wrote 2 of them myself. None of our records predicted this. I keep coming back to one detail. When the records liaison stood up to leave, he paused at the vault door and looked back at the cracked viewport. At the formation still visible in orbit, the hospital ship still running its recovery operations, the warships still holding position at the perimeter. He looked at it for a moment the way you look at something you have seen many times and still find worth looking at. Then he nodded, once to himself, and went back to work. I do not know what that nod meant. I recorded it anyway. I record everything. It is what I do. The archive will have to be revised. I have already begun the new entry. I am still writing it. I suspect I will be writing it for some time. The old category structure does not account for a civilization that monitors frequencies it was never given, answers calls it was never sent, goes to the casualties first, whichever side they are on. I am an archivist. I work with what I have. What I have now is a new kind of record to keep. I am keeping it.